Hey friends, how you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Chav Ches, Daf Koyach. Friends, we need Koyach. Why not? So, Daf Chav Ches, Daf 28 of Masechta Ksubis. We just kind of continue talking about, whatever. We continue talking about like the Kohanim and if they can't remain together out of concern for raping and pillaging. And then, we finished the second parak of Ksubis today. Let's get started with the Mishnah. And Daf Chav Zayin Amud Bey is about, towards the bottom of Chav Zayin Amud Bey is at the Mishnah. Omer b'Zechai ben Akatzev says b'Zechai ben Akatzev Amon Hazeh. He's basically like swearing, right? I'm swearing by this house. I guess like the Beis HaMikdash. He's basically saying, I swear. Lo zazo yodim mitoch yodim mishal shenichnasu ovdei kochavim liYerushalayim ad sheyatzu. Rabbi Zechai ben Akatzev says, look, I'm telling you that I stayed with my wife the entire time from the time that those nudniks came into Yerushalayim. Nothing happened. We could. Right, he was a kohen, and he says, look, nothing happened to my wife, and we can stay together. Amrulo. And they said to him, look, a fellow cannot testify about himself, and unfortunately we cannot trust your testimony, and therefore you cannot remain married. Says the Gemara, and even so, even though they couldn't remain married together, but nonetheless, at least he gave her a house in his courtyard. And what she would do is that whenever she would leave the courtyard, so she would be the first one of all her children to leave, so that the point was that they wanted to avoid a situation of yichud, of them being secluded in the same place, in the chutzner. So therefore, if he was in the chutzner and she was in the chutzner, and there were all the kids in the chutzner, and all the kids left, and she was still there, and it was just him and her, then they would be secluded in the same courtyard. So therefore, they always made sure to do the opposite, that when she would leave first, followed by her children, and when she would come in, the children would come in first, and then she would come in, and they would always make sure that they were never in seclusion with one another. What, can we do this by a grusha, right? If a kohen gets divorced, so he cannot remarry his wife who he divorced because he's not allowed to marry a divorcee. So what if a kohen gets divorced? Can he live in the same courtyard as his ex-wife? Do we say Hasam hu de b'shvuya ekelu? Do we say that davke when it came to Rabbi Zechai ben Akatzev, that it was a situation of a shvuya, of somebody who's taken captive essentially? So we're lenient there, and we say that they could live in the same courtyard. Aval hachalo, but we would not say that by what? By divorce. Or maybe it makes no difference, and also by divorce they could live in the same chutzner, just make sure that they're not secluded together. Tashma de Tanya Megayish Ishto lo tinosu b'shchunoso. We learn in a brayse that if a fellow divorces his wife and she gets remarried, they should not live in the same place, because as we learned about Masechta Yevamis, that you might have this irresistible wink, or like gestures of sorts, and she won't be able to resist, and then she'll she'll come back to him, but she can't because she got remarried. A whole mess. So if they get divorced and she gets remarried, they shouldn't live in the same area. And if he was a priest and they got divorced, even if she didn't get remarried, but they're divorced and they cannot get remarried because he cannot marry a divorcee, they shouldn't live in the same mavui, in the same sort of courtyard. Not courtyard, like, how did we define mavui? Friends, remember Masechta Eruvin? Oh, or did you forget? What was a mavui? Like a thing, I guess. They can't live in like the same thing. You all remember what a mavui is, right? Like the chutzers that open to the mavui. Friends, I don't want to go there. I don't want to go there. Now, if it was a small village, so Zayamaisa, so Takam, what's happened? They were in a small village. They said that we treat a small village like a mavui. What if they live in the same place? Who's got to go? Oh, who's got to go? Does he got to go, or does she got to go? Tashma coming here. The Tanya he nidches mi ponav. Ha ha ha. She's gotta go. Sorry. Vein hu nidche mi poneh. He doesn't have to go. But if she owns the space, if she owns the courtyard, well then he's gotta go. What if they both owned property in this courtyard? Now what? Who's gotta go? Tashma he nidches mi ponav. Well, we just said that she's gotta go. And what's the case where she's got to go? David's talking about where he owns the courtyard. Obviously, she's got to go. He owns the courtyard. So what? Are you going to suggest that maybe she owns the courtyard? We said that if she owns the courtyard, then he's got to go. So rather, it must be talking about this situation where they both own real estate in the courtyard, and we're saying that she's got to go. Maybe they're both renting and then she's got to go. But maybe if they both own, then she doesn't have to go. What do we say? Tashma hine Hashem mitaltelcha taltela gover. That the Eibush is gonna, I don't know, throw you around like a wandering fellow. So that it's more difficult for a fellow to have to wander around than for a fella to have to wander around, and therefore, so because it's the nebuchtika fellow, so the fella, she has to go find some other place. If when they were married, he borrowed from her nichse melug, from the property that she brings into the marriage that belongs to her the whole time, and that he could enjoy the fruits, but ultimately she gets back that property at whatever value it is, whether it went up, whether it went down, she retains that property. That's what the nichse melug are. And if he borrowed from her, from the nichse melug, and then they got divorced, so she cannot go, they shouldn't, he shouldn't pay her back in person. Rather, because we don't want them to be secluded together. Rather, it should go by way of a messenger. Number of sheishes, we also the common dinin. If they came before us together in judgment, i.e., they came together, i.e., not with like a messenger or something. We don't even look at them. We don't listen to them. Papa says we excommunicate them. Says that we whip them. Rav Nachman Tana Avol Rabasi, says Rav Nachman that it was taught in Avol Rabasi. That's dafka when they got divorced after they were married, right? That in that case we have to be concerned that if they come together, then they might, sleep with, it might lead to one thing to the next. But look, if they got divorced from Erisin, from engagement, but they never actually got married, they never actually lived together, so then they can, just get paid back in person, she'ein libo gospa, because he doesn't feel comfortable enough with her that it would lead to anything. There was an engaged couple that came before Rav Yosef, Rav Ada bar Masna Kame, and Rav Ada bar Masna was there in Oichet. Rav Ada bar Masna was also there. Uki Rav Shlucha ben Tayu. So Rav installed there a messenger to go, to be between this couple, so that nothing should lead to anything. Omer lei Rav Ada bar Masna v'Omer Rav Nachman Tana b'Av Rabasi v'chulei. So Rav Ada bar Masna asks Rav, but what about Rav Nachman, who says that he quotes from the Brisa of Av Rabasi that it doesn't apply to engaged people, that we don't have to be concerned about anything by engaged people because they're not comfortable with each other enough yet. So Rav says, yeah, but I can tell that they feel comfortable enough with one another. Ikadami, those who say it's the opposite. Lo ki Rav Shlech ben Tayu. Rav Dafka did not put a messenger between them. Rav Ada bar Masna then says to Rav, why don't we put a messenger between them? To which Rav says, but doesn't Rav Nachman say that we only have to be concerned from marriage, not from engagement? So Rav Ada bar Masna then responded to Rav, that's when they don't feel comfortable enough. But we see here that they do feel comfortable with one another, so therefore we should have a messenger. Alright, so, okay, what do you want me to tell you? Yeah, these couples, they got divorced, and The question is, we want to avoid a situation where one thing might lead to the next, and you know what I mean. Alright. Says the new Mishnah, Ve'elu ne'emanin l'hoid begodlan mashro bikotonon. It's like opals and bananas. You can pronounce it however the heck you want. Tomato, bikotnon, bikotonon, bikotinun, bakutanin. What other ways can you think of to pronounce that word? So these people are believed to testify when they get older that which they saw when they were younger. A fellow, when he gets older, is believed to say, look, I recognize this signature. When I was younger, the signature that he recognized from his father from when he was younger. Rebbe. And this is the handwriting of my teacher. This is the handwriting of my brother. I remember that at so and so's chasana, she went out with this hinuma. Remember, we had different options what a hinuma was. Maybe like some kind of bridal canopy or something, and her hair was down. Right, meaning to indicate that she's a besula. And that a certain fellow, he would leave the cheder, he would leave the yeshiva, he would leave the school to go to the mikveh in order to be able to eat trumeh, i.e. that he's a kohen, and that he would divide with us, together with us, he would chaparain trumeh, again indicating that he's a kohen. Also, a fellow could testify that when he was younger, he knew that this place was a Beis HaPras. We'll discuss it a little bit on Amud Beis, but we've seen a Beis HaPras before. It's a place that basically has a status of Tumah D'Rabbanan, right? There was a corpse buried in a certain place, and then they plowed the field, and now the corpse is basically scattered among the field. So the little pieces, right? Bones are not metame be'ohel, right? You would have to have most of the rov minyan or rov binyan. You'd have to have the skull and the vertebrae, or at least most of the bones. But over here where it's kind of scattered, it's not metame be'ohel, it's metame b'mago masa. If you touch it, if you move it, so it's all whatever. We're going to get to it on Amud Beis, but it's only tamim midrabanan. And you could testify that when we were younger, we would only walk until a certain place on Shabbos, i.e. that's where the Tchum Shabbos ends. But a fellow is not trusted to say that when we were younger, so-and-so owned this path, that also that somebody owned some kind of place, because that, we're going to get to it in the Gemara, but that already has nafkaminas, monetary implications, right? If you say so and so owns this property, so that makes a big deal, a big difference. So therefore, we don't trust him based on when he was younger. Says the Gemara, Amr Rafuna Breder of Yeshua. Says Rafuna Breder of Yeshua. What does he say? V'sheyesh gadol imo. Okay, so when we say that this fellow can testify about what he witnessed when he was younger, that's only if there is somebody who can testify along with him who at the time was an adult. Utzricha, and we need all of these cases. We need to testify about his father's signature, about his teacher's signature, about his brother's signature, the Ashminan of it, because if we only mention that he can testify about his father's signature, he's by his father all the time, he recognizes his father's signature. But not necessarily his teacher. V'ashminan Rabo, and if we say that he can testify about his teacher's signature, because he's in awe of his teacher, at least the way the art school explained it, he wants to sort of be like his teacher. He's a role model. He looks up to his teacher and he recognizes his handwriting. But maybe not his father per se. And if you say father and teacher, his father that he's always by, and his teacher who he's in awe of, but his brother who he's not necessarily with all the time and who he's not necessarily in awe of, so Emalo, so I might say that he cannot testify about his brother's signature that he witnessed when he was younger. Kamash Malon, Kevin Tikium Shtaris Midrabanon, Hemnu Rabanon Bidrabanon. Since being Mekayim Shtaris Midrabanon, as Rashi points out that according to Rish Lakish says, Edemach Subim ala Shtar Kimishenechkra Edusim Bebezdin, that having signatures on a document, it's as if they gave their testimony in Bezdin, i.e. we don't technically need to validate the signatures on a document, and therefore since the validation of signatures on a document is a rabbinic construct, so the Rabbanan said, look, we can even trust somebody who's now an adult to testify about, based on his knowledge from when he was younger, to testify about these signatures. A fellow is testified, is trusted to testify that when he was younger, he saw that a certain fella went out to a chasana in these things that Dafka Besula would go out with. So my timer came to Rav Nosson Besulas Nisos, give him Milsa Ba'amahu. How come we can trust a cotton to testify about this? Well, because since most girls when they get married, they are Besulas. And so therefore we can already assume that she was a Besula, and here comes this guy and he's saying, yeah, and I remember that she went up Beinumba V'Rosha Perua, the signs that she, right, things that only a Besula would do. So we could trust him because anyways we assume that she was a Besula. Anyways, this is really just sort of like additional clarification. Also we trust him to say that a certain colleague of theirs, when he was in Cheder, when he was younger, he would he would leave the cheder and they would go to the mikveh and then eat trumeh. So, you could testify that this fellow is a kohen. Vidilma Evid kohenu. But one second, how do you know that this fellow is a kohen? Maybe he was the slave of a kohen. And the slave of a kohen is allowed to eat trumeh. Mesele le Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Well, this Mishnah supports Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Dam Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, also the Adam Shilamid Sa'avdo Teir, that a fellow is not allowed to send his slave to cheder. And therefore, from the fact that we're saying that he would leave cheder to go to the mikveh, if he was an Eved, he wouldn't have been in cheder. Vilo, one second. A fellow is not allowed to send his slave to cheder. Vilotani, we learn in the Brisa, Love menu rabo, if his master borrowed money from him, from the slave, or shaso rabo apotropis, or his master made him an administrator over his business dealings, or sheniach tefillin b'fnei rabo, or the slave put on tefillin in front of his master, even though tefillin for an Eved is the mitzvah esei shezman grama, and he would be potter, or shkor shlosha psukim b'veis hakneses, or if he read 3 verses in the synagogue, how is that lo yetzi lecheres? You cannot assume that he's a free man, right? Meaning, if you see any of these signs, right, he puts on tefillin, reads Torah, so you cannot assume that he's a free man. You have to still assume that he is a slave. So we see that he's shekar shlosha psukim b'veis hakneses. It sounds like, right, he's going to synagogue. He's going, and we want to say he's going to cheder, right? Isn't this an indication that that you can teach your slave Torah? So the ikri Eved midaito. No, it's talking about the slave did not go to cheder. He just knew how to read these psukim on his own. Ki ka'aminon dekanoig bei. Minig banim. And when Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says that it's, you're not allowed to teach your slave Torah, it means you shouldn't send him to cheder. He could learn on his own, but he shouldn't go. You shouldn't send him to cheder, according to Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. The Mishnah had said lit bolecho betrume, to go to the mikveh to eat trume betrume derabanan. So it's talking about rabbinic truma, right? So again, he's only testifying about things that are midrabanan. Shecholik imanu ala goyren, and that he would chaparain with us by the right. I mean, people would give us truma, and he would be there as well. Vidilma Eved kohenu. But one second, how do we know that the fact that this fellow would be given truma means that he's a kohen? Maybe he's the slave of a kohen. Tanan Commander Omer in Chokin Truma leEved. Well, our Mishnah is assuming, like, the opinion that you don't do that. You don't give, as we learned to Masechta Yevamis, that you don't, this machlokas between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda that we're going to see in a second, about whether or not you can give truma to a slave. Ela imkein rabo imo, right? That according to our Mishnah, we would assume that you would not give truma directly to a slave unless his master was with him, but not without the master. The Tanyas we learn in a brayse in Chokin Truma le'Eved that we do not give Truma to a slave elim ken Rabu Imo unless the master is present. The Rabbi Yehuda, that's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Rabbi Yossi Omer says, Rabbi Yossi, Yochol Hu sheyomer im koyin oni tnuli b'shvil atzmi. Rabbi Yossi says, no, the slave can go to Chaparain Truma and say, look, if I'm a koyin, give it to me because I'm a koyin. If I'm Eved koyin oni, and if I'm the slave of a koyin, tnuli b'shvil Rabbi, so give it to me for my master. So our Mishnah is like the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who would say that you wouldn't give truma to a Eved without his master. Okay, fine. Because in the place of Rabbi Yehuda, they would assume that if you're eating truma, so then you're a kohen. But where Rabbi Yossi lived, I guess in Tzipori, so they wouldn't assume that because you're eating truma you are a kohen, and therefore you can have a slave go on chaparan truma, and we won't assume that he's a kohen, he might be a slave. Tanya, we learn in the brayso, Rabbi Yossi says, Rabbi Yossi, that I never testified. One time I testified, and because of my testimony, they made a slave into a kohen. Wait a second, how could it really be that Rabbi Yossi, on his account, they assumed that a slave was a kohen? Even the animals of the righteous, the Eibusher doesn't bring anything negative through them. Certainly, righteous people themselves, nothing negative will happen, right? This is a reference to the Chamor Shel Pinchas ben Yair that we learned about Masechta Shkolim. The donkey of Pinchas ben Yair, that he would only eat tithed foods, right? So here you have an animal of a tzaddik that wouldn't even eat anything untithed. Certainly, tzaddikim themselves, nothing bad would come from them. So how could it be that Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Yossi gave testimony that led to a slave being treated as a kohen? So Ela bikshu la'alos eved lechuna al pi. No, they intended they were going to make a slave into a kohen based on based on what I had said, but it didn't actually happen. Chazab asid Rabbi Yossi, that he had saw where Rabbi Yossi lives, he had seen a Eved receive Truma. Now, where Rabbi Yossi lived, they didn't assume that because you got Truma, you were necessarily a kohen. Then Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Yossi then went and gave this testimony where Rabbi Yehuda lived. Where did Rabbi Yehuda live? Where did Rabbi Yehuda live? Rabbi Yehuda, I don't know. Where did Rabbi Yehuda live? I'm not sure. Maybe like Yavne or something. Where Rabbi Yehuda lived, they would assume that if you're eating trumas and you're a kohen. So when Rabbi Lazar Rabbi Yossi said, "Look, I saw this fellow chaparain truma," they automatically assumed that he was a kohen, but that wasn't really the case. He was actually a slave. The Mishnah had said that we could trust this fellow to testify that from when he was younger that this place is a Beis HaPras. So again, so what's a Beis HaPras? So a Beis HaPras is it's a field, and in the field there was a corpse that was buried, and okay, so where the corpse is buried, so is Tameh, but then they plow the field, and now the corpse is basically strewn throughout the field. We don't know where. There's bone, right? The flesh is decomposed. There's just bones, and now the bones are kind of scattered throughout the field. We don't know where it is. So now, as I explained earlier, bones are not matami but ohel. So if you step over them, you don't become tummy. Only if you move them. So now says the Gemara, V'shamakom az beis hapras. He's testified. He believed to say at this place the beis hapras. My time, how come? Because beis hapras they're abonon. Because the Beis HaPras is only Tomei Midar Abonon. Amar Yehuda Amar Shmuel says Rav Yehuda name Shmuel Menapeach Adam Beis HaPras v'Olech. A person can simply just essentially be careful in a Beis HaPras. He can walk through this area as long as he blows away the dirt and make sure that there's no loose bones over there. Rav Yehuda Bar Ami Mishmed Rav Yehuda Amar Beis HaPras Shenida Shtar, that if you have a Beis HaPras that enough people have walked on it to kind of flatten it down, and that there any bones would have been crushed, and there's really nothing to be concerned about, so you could walk through it. My timer. Because if you have a bone the size of a barley kernel, if enough people have walked on that ground, any bone the size of a barley kernel would have been broken down already, and anyways not metame anyways. So, right, because it has to, right, if it has to be at least the size of a barley kernel in order to be metame at all. And if it isn't that, so then it won't be metame even if you move it. Also, these people are believed to say that when they were younger, they would walk until a certain place on Shabbos, and after that it was beyond the Tchum Shabbos, because the author of our Mishnah assumes that Tchum Shabbos is midrabanan. But they are not believed to say that when we were younger, so and so had some real estate over here, and that also that a certain fellow owned a certain real estate, that they are not believed to say to talk about from when they were younger. My time outcome because based on that testimony, we're then going to extract money, right? He's testifying about real estate. Real estate has value, so we cannot rely upon them for that. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Nemana Tinok Lomar, a little fellow is believed to say, Kach Omar Li Abba, this is what my father said to me, Mishpachos o Torah, Mishpachos o Tmeh, that this family is pure, this family is impure. Torah v'Tmeh Sakadatich, what do you mean? What families, how does a family become pure or impure? El Mishpachos o Ksher, Mishpachos o Psula. No, it means that this family is kosher, this family is pasla, i.e., is their lineage kosher apostle? Can they marry people that you need special lineage to marry? That we ate by the ktsatse of the daughter of so and so to so and so, and the Gemara is going to explain in a few minutes what a ktsatse is. And that we would bring challah and matnos kuna, right? We talked about the zohar l'chayayim v'keva the other day, right? The jaw, the cheek, and the stomach that they would give to the kohanim to eat, right? I.e., he was saying that this fellow is a kohen. So he's believed if he himself brought these the challah and the matonis to the kohen, but he's not believed to say that somebody else would have brought it there. No, he had to be the one to bring it. Now in all of these cases, if when he witnessed this he was an idolater, but then he converted to Judaism, or he was a slave and then he got freed, which makes him a yid, they're not believed if at the time that they witnessed these things they were either an Ovid Kocham or an Eved. And this kid is not believed to say that so and so owns some real estate over here. Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka Omer says Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka ne'amanu. They are believed. Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka Aheya. What's Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka going on? When he says that they're believed, well, they're believed about what? Yilema aseifa. If it's talking about the last thing, right, to testify about real estate. Obviously they're not going to be believed about real estate. Afukim amono. Right, it's extracting money. We can't trust them about extracting money. No, it's Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka is referring to the first part. In all of these cases of testimony, if they're an idolater and then they converted to Judaism, or a slave who got freed, they are not believed. Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka Omer says Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka ne'amanim detaka are believed. So that's what Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka is arguing about. What's the machlokas? Tanakama sover came to Ovid Kochavnu lo hayadayik. And Tanakama holds that, well, if he was an idolater when he witnessed these things, well then he was an idolater at the time. He wasn't paying attention to the same extent, to the same level that Yid would be paying attention for these testimony things. Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka sover came to daiti leigure meda kavadayik. Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka says, look, since he was intending to convert to Judaism, so therefore he was sort of paying attention to these things. Mike Tzotze. What's the Ktsotze, right? We talked about that this little kid can testify that he was present at the Ktsotze. The Tana Rabbanan, the Rabbi taught, Keitza Ktsotze. What's a Ktsotze? If you have a fellow, a brother who marries a woman from who wasn't supposed to marry, maybe the lineage wasn't right. So the family comes, Mevin Chavis Malei Paris, and they bring a barrel full of fruits, Vishovin also be'emtzu rechava, and they break the barrel in the middle of the open area, in the open space, the plaza. V'omrim, they say, Achenu Beis Yisrael, brethren, Shimu, listen, Achenu, our brother, Ploni, so and so, Nosa Isha Sheno Ogeneslo, married a woman who he shouldn't have married. Umisyarim Anu Shem Yisayiv Zarib Zarenu, we're concerned that his children will intermingle with our children. Bo Kulachim Dugma the Doris, come and take for yourselves a sample so you'll remember this. Shleisayiv Zarib Zarenu, that that his seed should not mix with our seed. We don't want to intermingle with his seed. And this is this tzotza thing. This is this thing that the young child is believed to testify about. This breaking of the barrel out of weddings that people aren't so excited about. Well, Hadron Allah Isha Shenis Armila. We'll come back to the Isha Shenis Armila. Friends, that was the Chof Ches of Masechta Ksubis. I hope you enjoyed. Peace out.